A very good evening to each one of you present here this evening in person, and also to everyone who's connected to us from the different parts of the world through our live streaming. Welcome to the Valedictory ceremony of the International Conference on Anti-Human Trafficking. It has been 2 days of intensive discussions, deliberations, and sharing with a record number of 389 participants. We had about 275 registrations. We were expecting a few more, but we were not expecting so many more registrations on the spot. So some of you who registered late may not have got the conference kit, and we apologize for that. It is very heartening to see so many of you here today to attend the valedictory ceremony. We have, over the last 2 days, realized even more how complex the issue of human trafficking is. It is a criminal activity responding to a series of economic, social, and political drivers, the so-called push and pull factors. Given this, the complexity, collaborative approaches are not just desirable, they are essential if progress is to be made to end the business of human trafficking. Hearing the inspirational speakers who are so passionate about their work, each one of us who have attended the different sessions feel empowered, motivated, and know that together we all can contribute in our own way to combat this issue. Millions of people worldwide are estimated to be trapped by the trade. And it is our collective responsibility to ensure their freedom as well as their rehabilitation. Let the spotlight be on the fact that this massive global issue cannot be dealt with single-handedly by a nation or a government or just the law enforcement agencies. This conference is a testament to that and has highlighted the importance of bringing together law enforcement, academia, relevant stakeholders, and others together to share their ideas, thoughts, and work experiences to tackle the issue of human trafficking together. Today, we do all feel motivated to do more to ensure that effective mechanisms are available to protect and assist the trafficked, prosecute the traffickers, and bolster prevention measures. I would like to welcome on stage Dr. P. Ishwara Bhatt, the Vice Chancellor of the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences, Kolkata. And I would request Poulomi Patro of the KMWSC to felicitate him. I would like to welcome on stage Professor Catherine Alice McKinnon, American radical feminist, scholar, lawyer, teacher, and activist. And I would request Sister Macarena, General Consultor of the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Rome, to come on stage to felicitate her. I would like to welcome on stage Ms. Ananya Chakraborty, the chairperson of the West Bengal Commission for Protection of Child Rights, and I request Nobonita Shom of the KMWSC to felicitate Mrs. Chakraborty. I would like to welcome on stage Sister Brenda Egan from Loreto IBVM, Rome. Sister Egan is from Chicago, United States, and is currently the General Consultor of the IBVM in Rome. May I request Meenakshi Roy of the KMWSC to felicitate Sister Egan. I would like to welcome on stage Diana Mao, the President and co-founder of NOMI Network, and I would request Ms. Reena Singh of the KMWSC to felicitate her. I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Adrian Phillip from Justice and Care, and I would request Ms. Shushila of KMWSC to felicitate him. We welcome on stage Sister Anita Maria Braganza, the Province Leader of Loreto South Asia and the President of the two social centers of the Loreto Congregation, the KMWSC and the DMWSC. And may I invite Meenakshi Roy of the KMWSC to felicitate Sister Braganza. May I invite on stage Sister Imelda of the IBVM Rome, and may I request Poulumi Patro to felicitate her. Professor Dr. P. Ishwara Bhatt is currently the Vice Chancellor of the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences, Kolkata. Earlier, he taught at the University of Mysore, where he was the Dean of the Faculty of Law. His other areas of interest include administrative law, law and social change, water law, research methodology, world trade law, intellectual property rights, and NPO laws. He has drafted legislative bills and university statutes. May I request Dr. P. Ishwara Bhatt to address the gathering.
Professor Catherine McKinnon and all dignitaries on the dais, all the dignitaries of the dais in the audience. Let me express a great happiness at this event of a valedictory event, where relating to the anti-human trafficking, 2 days international conference is coming to an end, where a lot of ideas, lot of suggestions, and various new propositions might have emerged. Getting more than 350 papers and more than 400 participants, etc., is a big achievement. I congratulate the organizers. I'm happy in participating as one of the organizing body. Relating to rights of women, let me point out that by considering women's rights as human rights, a big change has taken place at the international level as well as the domestic level. Trafficking in human being is occurring primarily against women and also against children and even other unfortunate sections of the society who are vulnerable. They are also subject to such a trafficking. It's a bonded labor and such practices. The idea that human rights of women should percolate to all levels, and various legal measures, administrative policies, and social actions should incorporate the international human rights of women in a most effective manner. About that, there has been much thinking. Beijing Declaration and various other international developments have emphasized that it is only by taking the rights of a women seriously, by considering each and every legal right of a woman as a human right and elevating to a very high level that the comfortable position can be attained and the interests of women can be better protected. Today we have Mr. Professor Catherine McKinnon, a very eminent scholar in the field of feminism, who has spearheaded a radical feminist movement. And one of the observations made by her is that it is only when women are made free from exploitations or when the foods are removed from the necks of women that their tongues will be able to speak in a free manner. It is essential that there ought to be application of both equality and liberty in order that the human rights of women can be better protected. Relating to rights of women, it has been emphasized in a number of Indian Supreme Court judgments that they are to be incorporated as a part of a dignified life itself. Human rights emphasize three vital factors: human well-being with a bodily integrity and autonomy, recognition of equality of status and dignity, liberty to take decisions and effectuate them in action. In the context of women, all these rights are to be supported by due process of law, rule of law, and social participation. Only through law it is not possible to expect radical changes. It is essential that the effort of the state and the law should be supplemented by the society, because any kind of a social change can be successful only when the exploited people are empowered and simultaneously the exploiters are convinced about the need to change their mindset. So winning the minds of the exploiter and filling the minds of the exploited sections with a sense of confidence so that they can empower themselves. These are the two things to be done simultaneously. Consensus model of social change can be effectuated only through the social participation. Thus, it is essential that the NGOs or media or various other organizations or local governments should participate, and they should join hands with the state bodies so that effective protection of women and children is possible. It is a very pathetic situation that as many as 20,000 women and children are victims of human trafficking in 1 year. In 2016, it has been reported that that is the extent of victimization that has taken place. It is essential that all these types of human rights violations shall be effectively addressed by such concerted efforts on the part of the society and the state as a whole. State is, of course, the child of a society, and the live veins of the state are always fed by the social force. Thus, without the help of society, without the help of all these organizations, it is not possible to get a success in the field of such a struggle against human trafficking. I hope that the discussions that have taken place during last 2 days have focused on various issues, maybe cyber crimes connected with human trafficking, or say international trafficking, or about the way in which Immoral Traffic Prevention Act is to be reformed, or it should be revised so that the needs of the time will be properly met. About so many such issues, there are such presentations. Of course, conferences and seminars are essential to generate new ideas, because ideas do not come just on individual efforts. When there is such interaction, there is a flash of new ideas. This is how the preparedness on the part of the society should be consolidated, and the effort that has been put during last 2 days is towards this direction. I am very happy that from various countries delegates have come, they have participated, and they have made this conference a grand success. However, the effort of struggle against such a human trafficking should continue, because conferences just provide a forum where ideas could be expressed, but those are to be implemented in the long run with an effective mechanism. With this, let me conclude. Let me congratulate the organizers in making this kind of conference in a very successful manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bhatt. The keynote speaker for the valedictory session is Professor Catherine Alice McKinnon. I would once again call upon Professor Bhatt to introduce Professor McKinnon.
It is a pleasure to introduce Professor Catherine McKinnon to this audience. She is an American radical feminist, scholar, lawyer, teacher, and activist. Born in Minnesota, McKinnon attended Smith College and her JD and PhD from Yale University. She is Elizabeth A. Long Professor of Law at the University of Michigan Law School. As a legal scholar, McKinnon has addressed the issues of sexual harassment and pornography. Professor McKinnon practices and consults nationally and internationally, and works regularly with Equality Now and an NGO promoting international sex equality rights for women, and the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. Professor Catherine McKinnon has produced a number of motivating books, and the latest book is Butterfly Politics, of course about various issues relating to gender justice. She has produced thought-provoking works, how the question of equality is to be taken in a very radical manner, and how a combination of equality and liberty is the strategy through which effective protection of women will be possible. Let me request Professor Catherine McKinnon to deliver her keynote address.
I believe this is Constitution Day. Happy Constitution Day, everyone. I am greatly honored by the generous invitation by the Loreto Sisters, and that is Mary Ward Center, that together with NUJS has brought me here so that we can be together and think together about these crucial issues. The focus on the term human trafficking, I'm sure those of you who have worked with this issue around the world have observed, but I would just like to underline one possible difficulty with it or danger that it has sometimes come to have, and that is that if one combines sex trafficking and labor trafficking together as issues, often it is at the disadvantage of both, but very often, at least in my observation, the focus on labor trafficking in the term human trafficking is used to obscure the predominance of the fact that most trafficking in the world is for purposes of sex. Most of it is of women and girls. And it's not that both are not important, both are important. Crucial violations of human beings. But I would observe that sex and labor overlap extensively in human trafficking in ways that a gender analysis reveals, but is often not considered, especially on the labor trafficking side of the discussion. That is, they overlap because much of women's work, that it actually is work, is sexualized. Also because many people are trafficked for labor or in ways they understand or are misled to understand will be for work, and then they wind up in the sex industry, which is not something that they ever chose to do. And also they overlap because it is common for women to be sexually violated in the context of work that actually is work. We call this sexual harassment, and it includes rape and other forms of sexual violation. So there is a major overlap between the issues of sex and the issues of labor in the human trafficking rubric. I don't think I need to explain to this audience that sex trafficking or being sexually violated, even if paid or if someone else is paid, is actually not work. We could discuss that further, but I think probably this audience does not need to be reminded of that fact. Just exactly what is trafficking, I would like to spend just a couple moments on. Again, I know that those of you who work with these issues are very familiar with it, but internationally, the Palermo Protocol definition, which has swept the world, roughly, that is most places, the Palermo Protocol to the Transnational Organized Crime Convention has swept the world. It includes, and most of the rest of my remarks are going to focus on sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. It includes being sexually exploited through force, fraud, or coercion for commercial sex. That definition and the industry's reality also include sexual exploitation through, and here I quote, abuse of power or a condition of vulnerability. Those who are most strongly targeted for sexual violation in the commercial sex industry are typically targeted through multiple abuses of power and placed in multiple intersecting conditions of vulnerability based on caste, race, or age, and are typically destitute, indeed desperately poor. All of these are conditions of vulnerability that, based on poverty, sex, age, and gender in particular with caste, define what my colleagues in APNIAP here in India call the last girl, the one who is most vulnerable to being sexually violated for commercial purposes. Sex trafficking, then, in the Palermo Protocol is defined as transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of a human being for purposes of sexual exploitation that is defined in that way. Now, if you think about it, transporting, transferring, harboring, receiving, also selling human beings in sexual exploitation is simply what pimps do. Movement across jurisdictional lines is not included in the definition of sex trafficking, and actually has not been an element of the international definition of trafficking since at least 1949. The sine qua non of trafficking is thus neither border crossing, nor is it necessarily severe violence. That is, to be subjected to a situation of abuse of power or a condition of vulnerability can include force or coercion, but it's actually a separate element that places one in a condition of potentially being vulnerable to being trafficked. What actually defines what's the difference between trafficking and any other kind of commercial sexual activity is third-party involvement. What this means is that anyone who is being pimped is being trafficked by international definition, whether they have ever crossed a border or been physically beaten. I say this because the concept of trafficking often seems to bring along with it a misunderstanding of having to go across borders or to be to be chained to a bed or threatened with a gun to your head, when in fact the international definition of trafficking that is adopted around the world reflects the realities, including conditions of vulnerability and abuse of power. So now the question is, what is the distinction between trafficking and prostitution? Since the destination of sex trafficking is prostitution. That's what it's for, to put people into prostitution. And so what's the distinction here? The distinction is that 86 to 89% of prostitution in the world is pimped. That means third parties are involved in it. Even if the pimp is your father, you are being trafficked. The balance of that could be called simply prostitution, if you like. It doesn't mean the two are identical, because one can prostitute oneself in theory. You can't traffic yourself. That's the distinction. So I mention this because there seems to be a lot of confusion in the debate about it. That is, you can't traffic yourself, so that distinguishes trafficking in theory from at least a small percentage of the way prostitution works. And I mean, it's similar to slavery. You can't enslave yourself either. There's got to be someone putting you into slavery. So third-party involvement is what distinguishes it. Now, the second thing I would like to talk about is that after making clear that we're talking here about most prostitution and also most sex trafficking. In other words, most trafficking is for sex, most sex trafficking and all sex trafficking is for the purposes of prostitution, and most prostitution qualifies for the definition of trafficking. The second point I'd like to make is that in this valedictory moment, since you have all been deeply discussing these issues, is that the division between women and girls in this discussion is almost as illusory as the distinction between prostitution and trafficking. There obviously is some distinction based on age, but it isn't as much, it isn't this kind of distinction that it is often made to be. In other words, acting as though all we really need to do is address the problem of girls and somehow can ignore the problem of adult women. I'm not saying you all do this, but we are in a much larger discussion that often ignores the continuity between girls and women. And I'd like to talk about that for a minute. I mean, the fact is, and everybody knows this, and nobody denies this, that if no one could enter commercial sex as a child at a time at which one really is the last girl, the sex industry would be depopulated overnight. The vast majority of people who enter prostitution enter it as children. I would recommend that you think about, both here in India and in other countries and around the world, the possibility of a law that would allow anyone who is now an adult to be able to go after the people who put them into prostitution as children. I call this a look-back provision. You know, now she's an adult, she's able to get out of this circumstance in a way that she wasn't as a child, but entered it as a child. And until adult women are empowered in this way, they're just going to grow up from last girls into so-called consenting adults at the time they pass the magical moment of 17 years and 366 days old, when all of a sudden they have this quality attributed by academics to them of agency, and suddenly, as we say, they are consenting adults. Well, the term consent just simply means she can be rolled over now and we can ignore it. And as you know, the international trafficking law, the Palermo Protocol, says consent is irrelevant. But nonetheless, the way the debate goes on here and the way interventions are often structured is that an exclusive priority is put on the treatment of girls. And I'm not saying it isn't a crucial thing to do, it is. But doing that to the neglect of women who are over the age line is a way of denying that most women enter the sex industry either as children or with previous sexual violation, or their first sexual experience, as is typical in India, especially in intergenerational prostitution, their first sexual experience is in prostitution, that is to say, of sexual violation, often gang rape. That exclusive concern over that particular moment denies that ignoring the prostitution of adults, or even defending it as some people do, again, not in this room, but elsewhere, supports the idea that, it supports the reality that continuous violation is acceptable on the ground that once they reach the moment at which they are no longer little girls. When in fact, they all started that way, they transition in this magical moment, and then suddenly they sort of drop off the screen of concern of people who address the prostitution of girls exclusively. I think it's perhaps telling that people who defend prostitution as sex work, that is, as a kind option for some poor women, not usually the person who's speaking, are willing to say that they oppose the prostitution of children. However, what they're doing is recognizing prostitution's harms in children only as a strategic retreat to allow its intrinsic harms to continue, along with all the inequalities that are exploited in prostitution. I would also just note that international law seems to have a bit of a concept that this notion of consent, as in now she's a consenting adult, is suspicious. And that if there's an abuse of power or a condition of vulnerability, that you're not allowed to appeal to this notion of consent. It's an illusion as well as a statutory preclusion. And it seems to understand then that what is called consent can be, and often is, essentially being overpowered. It is being dominated by people and conditions of inequality and coercion, that attributing consent to that simply means one acquiesces in a circumstance that one cannot change, that one cannot stop, that one cannot get out of. So let's also keep in mind that international understanding that the term consent is not equivalent to freedom. The sort of takeaway of this moment, I would say, is just that confining the recognition of prostitution's harms to children is not only illusory and false, it is ineffective. Until one sees that there is no actual distinction between adults and children in the way prostitution works. Hence the way trafficking for sex works. It's going to be virtually impossible to do anything about it. Now, my third point has to do with addressing the question of, okay, what are we going to do about abuses of power and conditions of vulnerability? What I would like you to consider is that the conditions that produce the possibilities of abusing power with impunity, the conditions that create vulnerability, that simply rescuing individuals one at a time, even giving them shelter, is never going to be enough. There aren't enough of us. The power that keeps creating them and will keep on recreating them is what needs to be addressed here. Safe space helps. But a number of different approaches are being pioneered to this question. What are we going to do for these women and girls? Not simply, break in and take them away at the moment in which they're already in there. And then, do we really have what it takes to follow through on that? One approach that is being pioneered here in India, creative, far-reaching, and again by my colleagues in APNAB, is what they call the asset approach. Each woman has an asset card, and the women who wish to be exiting prostitution are being empowered through gaining these assets. And they include, yes, a safe space, also, however, education, self-confidence, political power. I mean, these aren't just pie-in-the-sky things. This organization actually activates, works to produce these things on the ground, and it transforms lives. I have seen these women from being little children, growing up into young women. Government IDs, government subsidies, getting access to those benefits to which they are already entitled but have been deprived, very often by being denotified castes. But this is applicable anywhere in the world. People in prostitution don't have any of these things, not anywhere. Savings and loans, particularly for at-risk women, in order to get access to their own entrepreneurship. Livelihood linkage, legal empowerment, and self-empowerment groups, so that each of the women are in groups not only that work to produce these assets for them, but also to support them in the getting of them and in moving their own lives forward. So this asset approach is comprehensive and is based on what the women, the survivors, who are the real experts on this, have asked for and said they need in order to leave prostitution. Now, when you think through that whole list, you see what I mean when I say just rescue isn't enough. And then again, in a shelter isn't enough. A second initiative that has been taken by this group, but also is available elsewhere, is the approach of public interest litigation. We, that is APNAP, brought a action in court to, under Article 23 of the Constitution of India, which prohibits sex trafficking, actually trafficking in human beings, including for sex, and sought police protection, which up to that point had essentially been going to the criminal gangs and the pimps and the perpetrators, rather than to either the prostituted women or the activists working with them in an attempt to support them in their exit, or to keep the children from being re-abducted by their fathers and forced into prostitution in order to support the families at the age. Actually, when I was here last, it was 10. Now everyone says it's 9, so we're talking in that age range. This PIL, public interest litigation, based on the voices of survivors, is, it was won. It is in a creative judgment, and the Justice Sinha, who wrote it, I would quote as saying this: "This is part of his recognition of the need for creative, extensive rehabilitation." This is a quote: "Rescue of the trafficked victim is meaningless if the victim is not provided protective care, vocational training to enable her to stand on her own feet and become economically self-reliant. The absence of adequate vocational training, in this absence, the rescued victim is likely again to go back into the same black hole from which she has been rescued." So this is a creative initiative that is being taken by survivors and by those who work closely with them, representing them, and actually getting access to the kinds of things the state should be providing them anyway. And there are fast-track trafficking courts now in Bihar. This is in effect in Bihar at this time. Traffickers are being brought in front of it. Some of them are being sentenced. I mean, it is actually working. So people who want to throw their hands up at the Indian state and just say, oh, well, it's all so corrupt, how can we possibly even consider going there? Consider that prostituted women, who are the people who have been most abandoned, indeed most ignored by the state indeed often themselves violated by people who represent the state, are the ones who brought this and are making it work for them. Actually, I was hoping that two women who were part of that case would be able to take some of my time today to speak about this, but this was not permitted. The third initiative that I would just urge you to explore, both here in India and in any countries from which you all come, is what has come to be called the Nordic model. It is an idea that began in Sweden, was proposed in 1990 and passed in 1999, and has been followed by many other countries. And the fundamental premise is that prostitution is a form of violence against women. The major initiative in it is to strongly criminalize the buyer. Decriminalize, if you still have criminal or administrative or any sanctions against prostituted people, anyone, women, boys, girls, transgender people, anyone who's being prostituted or prostituting, eliminate those sanctions. These people are the experts. They are the ones who need the support if they want it. Keep the state off their necks, okay? But go after the traffickers and the pimps, although I will observe that in many instances, they are members of the same subordinated groups that the prostituted people are. Doesn't excuse what they're doing, that they're using other people and pushing them and violating them and taking everything that, if anything, they make. But fine. You know, there have been laws against trafficking and against pimps all over the world for the longest time. And it doesn't do much, okay? However, what is doing something is the Nordic model, and that is going after the buyers. Now think about this. The buyers are the most powerful people in this picture. They are the wealthiest. They are of all classes, including predominantly upper class and upper caste. They are also, you know, rich white countries demanding poor brown women be sucked in to them. And this is the United States. Whole containers full of women from Thailand, for example, get loaded off into New York Harbor and, you know, put into brothels, unilingual brothels in New York with not a passport in sight. And the reason, I mean, the pimps are making a lot out of it, of course, but the real reason is because rich white men demand it. They have the money, they will pay. So the most powerful people in this picture, the reason sex trafficking exists, the reason prostitution exists, is the demand for it. These are the real criminals. These are the people who have been left off the hook by almost all countries, even those that have a slight law or a bit of a law against buying a person. Now their big thing, by the way, is to say, oh, okay, we hear you about the demand. Now we will prosecute buyers who bought trafficked girls, if girls, first of all, they want them underage, or even trafficked women, but we have to prove they knew they were trafficked. Now, I mean, really. You know, he's going to say he knows she was trafficked. Usually, actually, they kind of do. They're a little suspicious about the fact that all the women are of the same ethnicity, that none of them speak English, that they seem intimidated. You know, these guys are not stupid, okay? But the idea of the Nordic model is to go after them, arrest them, fine them, jail them. At least that's an option. And the demand for prostitution we have learned, is soft. It's what in the economists call soft demand. What that means is, if there's a real price to be paid, this isn't something they have to do. No one ever died from lack of sex. I mean, the whole discussion is about whether these men are going to have sexual access to a woman today. That's what all this discussion is for, all this air. And it's not whether she's going to be able to make a living. She isn't making a living. It's about whether he's going to get laid. Okay, does one say this in India? You get laid? Okay. So you know what I'm saying. I call this the equality model because it empowers the victims, raising her status, and disempowers the exploiter, lowering his. So they are at a more equal level because the state has intervened to equalize against this unequal reality. And then, of course, you have to train the police to realize that they aren't seeing a woman exercising her human right to sell her labor. They're actually witnessing a human rights violation by a man attempting to buy her and access to her body. And once they get this, which they can and do, and arrest them, in Sweden, the prostitution has dramatically declined, about 85% in the big cities in just the first few years. And trafficking, sex trafficking, has virtually been eliminated. There's still some of it, but again, traffickers, not being idiots, can just traffic people into Germany, for example, where they can just keep paying and paying and paying, and they cash in, they get more and more and more money. Whereas, why traffic into Sweden, where your customers are criminals? It's just a stupid business decision. And in addition to Sweden, the Nordic model has been passed, why it's called Nordic, in Norway and Iceland, but it has also been adopted in the Republic of Ireland, largely in Canada, almost entirely, and fully in France. The best thing about the French bill, which I would urge you to look at as probably a better model even than the Swedish one, is that a great deal of support is provided for people who wish to leave. Real backup, real resources. This is what they're asking for. You know, they all have dreams about the life they want to have. You know, if you want to have an interesting conversation, ask a woman in prostitution what she would really like to be doing. You know, not just what do you most need, because the answer of 72% of them worldwide is what I most need is to leave prostitution, but I don't know how. So that's how we know they are enslaved, because they are in a condition of prostitution that they can't leave, although they want to get out. But then ask her what she would do if she wasn't doing this, and they all have very clear ideas. You know, particularly entrepreneurial ones. They want to run a cafe and feed people, a small food concession, or they want to run a boutique because they have an interest in fashion and design. They also may want to design and sew their own creations. They want to run those cabs that mostly men are running, but they want their own cab, a small transportation vehicle, that they can use to transport people around. And don't think once you've been in prostitution, you're not scared to drive a cab. Let me put it that way. And, as a woman. So they all, have a clear vision of a life with dignity, with hope, with real love. And the French bill, with this kind of support, that is, exit strategies that promote sex equality is what it is. Exit strategies that reduce the vulnerabilities of the women that are why they are there and actually give them real choices. Food, housing, again, loans, all this too, if it's prior to entry, it's even much, much more effective. I probably don't need to tell you by contrast with the Nordic model, the ways that legalization doesn't do any of this. But just to give you one sentence, and I'm sure as I say it, you don't need this, but legalization of prostitution across the board, I mean, the Nordic model essentially legalizes the victims. It's a partial legalization and criminalizes the violators, the pimps, the traffickers, and strongly the buyers. But legalization across the board is essentially a pro-trafficking position. It decriminalizes pimps. It decriminalizes traffickers. That is what the legalization position is. It says that human trafficking, not only being trafficked, but trafficking other human beings is a job. It is employment. It is something, you are a manager. You are an entrepreneur. It is something you should be able to sell human beings and access and use of them, just like other people sell furniture and land. It also hasn't delivered any legalization, where it is the case, hasn't delivered any of its promised benefits. It hasn't reduced organized crime at all. The German government, by the way, has a report on this, and they're very clear on it. The Swedish government has a report on the success of the Nordic model. They have found that it works as intended, reducing violence against women, reducing prostitution, reducing sex trafficking. Not a single person has died in prostitution since it was enacted. 55 women have died in German brothels since legalization. So the violence against women does not reduce with legalization. If anything, it increases and so does illegal prostitution, as well as trafficking. It's a giant magnet for traffickers. And it also corrodes any law enforcement addressed to the sex industry, as well as gives everyone the impression there's nothing wrong with this. I'm waiting for women to be required to work in brothels in order to get unemployment compensation. Because if it's just a job, and you have an unemployment compensation structure, you are required, at least in the United States you're required to take any available employment. So if that's available employment, and you lose your job, in theory, you should have to work in a brothel before you get unemployment compensation in places that have those schemes. The other aspect to keep in mind about the distinction between legalization and the Nordic model is what happens to the stigma. The legalization people will tell you that the stigma is all about it being criminal. Well, funny that, because when it's legalized, the stigma remains. It is still stigmatized. It is still so stigmatized that only 4% of women in prostitution in the Netherlands are part of the legalized system. And the reason is they don't want prostitution, written down as part of their official life history. What that means is the promised benefits of reducing illness, as well as reducing violence and assault on them, getting access to the health system and such, doesn't take place because they aren't part of the legalized system. They don't see that their life is going to be in prostitution forever. They think they have to do this right now. But they see a time when this will not be their life. and they don't want it to be an official part of their life history. However, in Sweden, the stigma, it appears, is beginning to shift to the Johns. Younger Swedish people overwhelmingly support the Nordic model. This has been studied. Do people still want this? You know, younger people are just horrified at the very idea of buying a person to use for sex in Sweden. I mean, this is what the studies of their attitudes show. And the stigma of it doesn't attach to the people being used, it attaches to the people using them. Whereas in all the legalized places, we still have the stigma of prostitution attaching to prostituted people. Even though, you know, it's supposed to be that it conveys that there's nothing wrong with it because it's just a job, which is not happening. I mean, I think people should consider that the stigma of prostitution comes from prostitution, from the intrinsic lack of dignity to it, from the systematic violation involved in it, and from the fact that no one who can choose, virtually no one who can choose not to be in it, chooses to be part of it. The final caution I would leave you with is I would urge you to look beyond what is often a superficial moral approach to trafficking issues. That is, just stopping at the point of, oh, well, we all know trafficking is bad, even perhaps seeing prostituted women as fallen women needing rescue by you. My point is, this will never end until we look to the underlying conditions that are coercing the people involved. They enter prostitution when all else fails them and their families, and this happens often. And in particular, to women of discriminated against minorities based on race, ethnicity, caste, religion, all the grounds of discrimination, and gender. When these realities of power, these inequalities that are what create the vulnerability that permits the sexual exploitation, are not addressed, you run the risk of reproducing them in your own work, however good your intentions to the contrary are. That is to say, beginning from one's own morality, I would just urge you to consider is about you. And trafficking isn't about you. It's about them. And it's about the realities of powerlessness of her, of the last girl, and when she grows up and is then the last woman. That is, the realities of vulnerability and abuses of power on which survivors are experts. Putting them in control here is both a realistic and effective way of ending human trafficking. This method will move all of us from practice to theory to practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor McKinnon, for your very informative address. You will be happy to know that the Maryboard Social Centers also strive to give financial independence to the rescued women by providing them with skill development in different areas like tailoring, paper bag making, beauticians training, and confectionery training. I would now request Ms. Ananya Chakraborty, the chairperson of the West Bengal Commission for Protection of Child Rights, to share her thoughts with us.
Thank you, all of you, for being in this whole process of trying to bring about change. I think if we all try as sincerely as the organizers of this conference have worked on this, there will definitely be change. And I always believe in the words of Mother Teresa, who used to believe that change can begin with one person. And I still remember two little visuals that I had seen of her. One was a film that was made on her, and there was a man lying on the street, and he was diseased and he was very dirty and everyone had abandoned him. And she started cleaning him. And he asked her, "Why are you doing this to me?" And she said, "Because I love you." So this is the spirit of universal love that this city was blessed with the love of Mother Teresa. And I still remember there was one place when she went to a war zone because she wanted to serve there, and the army was not allowing her because they said it's a threat to security and that no one has been allowed inside. And she was insisting that she wanted to go in there. And she said, "I want to be the first one to go in, and I want to be the first one to start serving the people." So I think in Calcutta, in Bengal, we are blessed to have had Mother Teresa here. We are blessed to have the missionaries working here so sincerely in all their endeavors. And ever since I assumed this position, I have been working very closely with a number of NGOs who have been doing excellent work. And I would like to assure Professor that there are many good practices being practiced by several NGOs here, which we would like to share with you at some point. We would like to send you the good practices that are being done. And so I see hope that one day we will put an end to this exploitation, this form of trafficking that we see. And that all of us together will do our bit, and we will not have any more cases of trafficking of vulnerable women and boys being trafficked. I see only hope from here, because we have been talking about the issue so intently, so many sides to the issue, the rehabilitatory issues, the issues of repatriation, the issues of prevention, the issues of establishing the survivors, which we have been deliberating on in the last 2 days. We've been sharing the practices, the good practices that we each one have been doing. And I would like to end with this note of hope and happiness that we are on our way, and we are on the way to criminalize the demand sector eventually, and we are on the way of dismantling patriarchy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being so hopeful. I think all the discussions and deliberations we've had over the last 2 days were also speaking of a lot of hope that things are definitely going to get a lot better. With so much of passion, so much of involvement of everybody, it has to get better. May I now request Sister Brenda Egan, General Consultant from the IBVM General Leadership in Rome, to address the gathering.
Words, 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 huh? How about that? Words, words, words. Can you see me? Yes. Okay. We are living in a world in need of transformation. I don't think you heard me. We are living in a world in the need of transformation. You think so? Yes. I was talking to God last night. What's that? I was talking to God last night. Yes, and it was this. Put a little God talk in there for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So I was talking to God last night, and I'm a sister, so I could say this, that each one of us have someone, a force that we believe in that is more powerful than ourselves. Are you with me? Yes. Thank you. So we are living in this world, and we have been hearing all the statistics, the data, the interventions that all of us, NGOs, have been involved in. People, believers, doesn't matter what religion. All that matters is that we believe that we can change this horrific reality that we're living with. And so I decided we didn't need any more words. We need some action. I think we're all involved in action, but when you come to a conference, you sit with a lot of words, right? Right? I just need your help staying awake here. You know what I'm saying? I just need your help staying awake. Awake to the reality that we, all of us in this room, have something to say about this problem. We have talked about it locally, nationally, internationally, globally, for God's sake. It's everywhere. One thing I think we've missed a little bit, and someone just touched on it, the personal. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Have you asked yourself the question, where am I in this picture? Where are all the traffickers out there and all the victims out there? They're somewhere in between. Where am I in this picture? Martin Luther King had a movement, a civil rights movement. He didn't start the movement on his own. Rosa Parks, and many of you may not know who she is. Rosa Parks sat down so he could stand up. You know what I'm saying? He started a movement, first with words and faith and passion. And then he got up and he started moving. Not just with the Baptists, not just with the people that came to the same church that he went to, but he started a movement that got people thinking and looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, it's not just their problem. If it's their problem, it's my problem too. So here goes. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. voice in this room. Not just my voice, not just all these dignitaries. It takes all of us. We're all the dignitaries. We're all the ones, everybody's got a piece of the truth. And God invites us, whatever name you put on that God for yourself. I know who I'm talking about. You have to identify who you're talking about. God gave you the gift. And you decided to say yes. You walked into this conference and you said, let me join my voice with those others so that we can live and learn and change some things. We talk about it at our hairdressers. We talk about it at our pulpits and our synagogues and our mosques. We talk about it at our dinner tables. And when we stop talking about it, the secret continues to fester. And so groups like this, times like these, when we talk about the disease of trafficking in human beings. In the old days in the U.S., it was quite legal to put a human being on a pedestal over here and talk about his or her characteristics and how good they were going to make money for you. Now most of that's gone underground, or in the, what is it called, the black net or the dark net or the whatever net is gone underground. But we all know it exists. And when I say we've talked about it on a global level, I think now we need to talk about it on a personal level. How do I contribute to this disease? And at the risk of using too many more words, I just want to invite you, to look in the mirror, to sit down at night or in the morning and examine your life. Where do I see the abuses? How do I contribute to the abuses? We call this, at the end of the day, an examination of your own conscience. If you walk out the door and you say, I walked away with not even one solution, I think you will have heard many recommendations, many, that went in one ear and perhaps out the other. But I invite you, if you can do nothing else than earn your living working in an NGO, nothing else, start with yourself. Where am I contributing to this, to the solution or to the problem? And when you ask whatever appropriate question you feel ready to ask yourself in the mirror, you say to your God, whom you're face to face with, and what must I do now? Give me some light and some guidance. And don't just keep talking. Words. Listen a little bit. Are you with me? Yes. Can you relate to that? Because it's all our voices. It will take all our voices. And I was going to tell you a story about a couple of experiences I had while visiting here these last 2 weeks. 2 students, one from Loretto Darjeeling and the other from Loretto St. Teresa in Darjeeling on the same campus. They did a Facebook sting and caught a trafficking organization that was trafficking a young girl from the school there, and they got a big award for it. You know, these kids were 14, 15 years old. They're doing it. They're asking the questions. They're taking on the responsibilities. Use your voice in the voting booth. Use your voice in trying to change the laws that will make a difference. Yeah? Another young woman told us the story, I think she came from the Buddhist tradition, and she told us the story of the lotus flower that is grown in mud and dirt and sort of filthy, muddy water. But what comes up is this beautiful flower. Sometimes that nasty stuff, we have to deal with it. We have to face it. We have to almost always live with it. But we never succumb to it. And so, hear your voice singing that song. We shall overcome. You're right. Lots of people are involved in the solution. Now let's make it personal. Let's not wait for the politicians. Let's not wait for the priests and the other people in power. Start in the mirror. Yep. One more time. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. I think so. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart,
Thank you so much, Sister Brenda. I'm sure that the powerful force that each one of us believes in will help us to overcome the many horrific realities that we are faced with today. And I would like to tell you that this particular song, We Shall Overcome, became very popular in Bengal, where you are now, as Amra Korbo Joy, We Shall Overcome, and it was popularized by a very good singer who was himself blind, but he overcame his disability. And I'm sure tonight each one of us will look into the mirror and ask ourselves many important questions. Diana Mao is the president of NOMI Network and an abolitionist who hopes to ensure the complete end of human trafficking in her lifetime. One of the standout leaders in the movement to abolish slavery, she co-founded NOMI Network, a non-profit organization that creates economic opportunities for survivors and women at risk of human trafficking. Since its inception, Diana has played an important role in making NOMI Network the high-impact international organization that it is today. May I invite Diana Mao to share her thoughts.
First of all, I want to say thank you. It's truly an honor to be here today. I am so undeserving of being here after meeting everyone at this conference, in particular people on the front lines, like my team, Supay, Shankar, Henry, Arnab, Priyanka. You're all here today. And Chandra, who spoke earlier, Sister Monica, and frankly, all of the panelists. I attended the cybersecurity one. All of you, right now, I want you to stand because I want to give you a round of applause. So please, don't be shy and stand. And my team as well. I want you to stand, and I want you to look at each other. Look at each other. You are the people. You are the people making a difference. You are the people creating change. You are the people that are fighting on the front lines. So you are the people that should be up here. But I am here today because of girls like Nomi, who I had the honor of meeting back in 2008. She's a survivor of sex trafficking from Cambodia. When I met her at the shelter, she had been trafficked by her stepfather and suffered from bipolar disorder, as well as was biting the other children. And her shelter director was telling me about the situation. Just 2 years ago, she had entered the shelter. But when I saw her, she ran to me and my co-founder and embraced us. And her name was Nomi. And it's girls like her that move us. It's girls like her that move us to do what we do today. It's girls like her who give us a hope that there is ability for her to rise. And today she is 18. We visit her every year at a shelter near the Thai border. So I can't imagine walking in the steps of girls like Nomi. I can't imagine being a girl living in a desolate village in northern India where people dump trash near my hut, and I'm forced in the wintertime, my family burns that trash, and literally there's a layer of smoke. People have tuberculosis, all types of diseases. I cannot imagine that. And throughout my tenure at NOMI, I've spoken with elected officials, I've spoken with business leaders, I've spoken with fashion influencers. And they cannot imagine a world where there are 46 million people, according to the recent UN report, 45.8, trafficked today. They cannot imagine. But you can imagine it because you've lived it. You live it every day. You've seen it with your own eyes. You've chosen the call. You've sacrificed it all. You've dedicated your life to fight human trafficking. For me, every day is an uphill battle. But it's women like Renu, who in our program, prior to our program, could not even sign her name. Now, having gone through the training, signed her name and is also being paid by us to train other women. It's women like Naj, who is illiterate and now just opened her poultry business after attending our training. 10,000 rupees per day, employing 3 people in a remote village in northern India. Suka, who is a survivor of sex trafficking in Cambodia, now a fashion designer because she's going through our fashion school and incubator in Cambodia. Paj, who now goes to medical school because she has scholarship from us. Many others who now are going to law school with a scholarship from NOMI Network. All with the ambition to return to their villages and be agents of change. It's about women like Chandru, who was trafficked into the United States from Indonesia and now is meeting with US presidents, was appointed by Obama to shape legislation. And she has her own nonprofit as well, creating economic opportunity for survivors in New York. She houses people personally in her apartment, people that have no shelter. These are people I'm talking about that are sacrificing it all. These are people that we should be raising our hands and clapping for right now. So there are 46 million people in slavery today, from the cotton fields of Uzbekistan to the textile mills of India to the brothels in northern India. This is the greatest tragedy of our generation. And speaking of textile mills, Department of Labor recently, actually a few years ago, released a report that 68% of raw materials, cotton, cacao, coffee, contain forced or child labor. These are the same children that are being sexually exploited. These are the same children that are being sex trafficked, as well as forced to work and make bricks. I recently was invited to a Delta anti-trafficking conference, and the speaker got on stage, actually, and said, "You are all slave owners." And mind you, there's a lot of activists in the room. You are all slaves. So I, was just kind of like, oh, what does he mean by that? But if you do the math, if you do the calculation, there is something that we all own that has tainted forced or child labor within our own clothing, within our own closets, within the coffee we drink, within the chocolate we eat. So we must really look inwards as well. We must look at our maids. I know in the context of India we have maids. We also have drivers. How are these people treated? Does this job empower them, or does it take away their power? Does it take away their dignity? Does it strip them of that? So I ask you, and I ask myself, to look into that. There are many organizations represented here today from all over the world. Based on my experience leading NOMI Network for the past few years, I have a few humble recommendations. First, we need to collaborate. In the words of Jesus and Abraham Lincoln, who was the first president of the United States to abolish slavery, it was an uphill battle for him, but he stood his ground. He said that a house divided cannot stand. I've seen the power of unity when people lay down their egos, lay down their credentials, lay down everything, and come together and work together. I've seen it in Cambodia. We work with 40 NGOs, all fighting human trafficking. And there's been an impact report that shows a reduction of child sex trafficking. A reduction. Can you imagine that in Cambodia, where children as young as 5, just 10 years ago, were being paraded in brothels? Can you imagine? Just 10 years later, a reduction. And that is the power of unity. My second challenge to all of us is, well, first of all, I just want to say, let's remember this. Human trafficking, according to Siddharth Kara, is $150 billion industry. $1 billion. We must remember that it is an industry, that there is a respective business model tied to it. Someone is benefiting financially from the exploitation of women and children. So, my second challenge to all of us is to innovate with the private sector. Private sector, large companies bring in billions of dollars, billions and billions. We cannot do it alone, and there are untapped resources there. Nomi works with powerful brands like Sephora to create more employment channels and jobs for women at risk of human trafficking. For the private sector, it's a gender issue, but it's also a pipeline issue. A pipeline when a population of women and girls are left behind. And as a result, the economy will be left behind as well. They're not going to be able to reach their full potential when women are not participating in the workforce. And studies show when women earn income, they're the one that feed their children, they're the one that send them to school, they're the one that change their community. So, let's ask ourselves, and let's ask the private sector, how can we get more women in trafficking hotspots into jobs, into employment? So, I challenge all of us that we should be working hand in hand with the private sector. Third, take care of yourself. The battle is long and not for the faint at heart. My lowest point at Nomi Network was back in 2015 when I got the horrible news on September, one Sunday, that one of our trainees' daughters was murdered. At the tender age of 12, her body was found and rape was suspected. That Sunday morning, my friend happened to be with me, I broke down and I lost hope. Her death took a toll on my heart and kept me up at night for weeks, wondering what else could be done. Through the support of friends, mentors, by the end of the month, I was back and ready to lead. Through that, I learned that we must allow ourselves to grieve the losses and to celebrate the wins. A year later, sadly, there was another loss. Another woman's son who was murdered at the age of 10 because he had apparently defended his sister who was being harassed by boys in the village. That broke my heart, and his bravery and heroism is just unprecedented, standing up for his sister at such a young age. But that is like the type of community that, as Sister was speaking about, Lotus, where out of nothing, something beautiful can emerge. Through Nomi, we were able to help with both cases, mobilize a legal team, and happy to report that the boys' case, the murderers, 3 men, were arrested and are currently sitting in jail. Past 2 days at this conference, we've talked about trends, challenges, climate change, and new risks as cybercrimes, and the list continues. I did not know that cybercrimes is vastly growing, and social media, internet, and really what we think of in India as typical areas where women and girls are trafficked now, it could be through a phone. It could be actually your son or daughter. And data, according to the panel that I attended, shows that it actually is a more higher income bracket population as well. So you can see that this actually issue touches everybody, not just people that live in poor areas, not just people that live in areas with low infrastructure, no electricity, no water, like the areas that we work in. And so today, we are literally together with practitioners, policymakers, influencers. We're changing the ecosystem in which trafficking thrives, serving the most vulnerable, unlimited resources. And you all are doing that. You are truly my heroes. And together we stand and believe that human trafficking will end in our lifetime. So now I want you, I know it's dark in here, so it'll be easy for you to close your eyes. I would like you to close your eyes. All of you, please. Now imagine a forest of redwood trees. They are the tallest trees on this earth, and actually from my home state in California. But did you know they have shallow roots? And that is how they don't tip over when the extreme winds and floods come. They have root systems that extend over 100 feet from the base, intertwining the roots with other redwoods. This increases the stability, and due to strong winds and floods, they are able to stand. We are the redwood forest. Can you please be quiet? We're going through this. Thank you. We are the redwood forest, and I know more trees will join us, including the redwood forest that is forming with the clients that we serve, who are now linking up with others and supporting one another. Now remember, you are loved, you are valued. Tap into the living streams of water, living streams. Now please open your eyes. You are strong, you are powerful, and I want us to rise and say, let's end human trafficking, break every chain. So please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in rising and saying, let's end human trafficking, break every chain. Thank you, and please give yourself a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Diana. It was indeed very heartening to hear the success stories of Know Me Network, and we definitely have to collaborate and work together to make the inroads, and we also have to learn to handle the losses so that we can be successful. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite Sister Imelda Poole for her words. Sister Imelda Poole is from the United Kingdom and is on a mission in Albania for the last 11 years. She has been working in the field of anti-trafficking. Prior to this mission, Sister Imelda began ministry as a teacher in secondary education, followed by ministry in formation, spiritual direction, and counseling. Sister Imelda.
Well, good evening. I was invited to speak a little bit about Albania. And after my wonderful speakers that I've just heard, it's almost time for me to be silent, I think. However, I have the task to follow these amazing men and women who have spoken. And I'd like to just add a little, almost like an addenda to their stories, by saying that our congregation, Loreto, were called on 14 years ago to have the courage to move. And every province in the world was invited to go outside their boundaries and open a community where the need was greatest. And in England, where I was on mission in the northeast on a council social housing estate, we were deliberating for a whole year. Where should we go? We went round the world and back. And it was our invitation to Caritas England and other international organizations to support us in our discernment that led us to go to Albania. Why? They said, Albania is the poorest country in Europe. but especially because Mother Teresa of Calcutta was in your congregation for 20 years, and she was from Albania and launched out and had the courage to move. So go with God, go with this call, and open your eyes to the greatest need. We went about 4 times to Albania to do a social analysis bit, to talk, to listen, and it was the Archbishop of Tirana that said, please, will you work in the field of anti-trafficking? Just to give you a brief history of Albania, Albania was for 500 years occupied by the Turks. Following that, there was a brief time of a kind of slow walk into democracy. And then Italy occupied Albania. Albania was broken up after the war, after the Second World War. And a tyrant from internally took over the country and led Albania into an atheistic, torturous communism. All the borders were closed. The people of Albania were told the enemy was going to invade. And the country became poorer and poorer and poorer and more frightened. Now, why do I tell you this? Because, you know, the world was almost controlled by a colonial serfdom in the past, including your beautiful country. In Albania, the poverty, the extreme poverty was unnecessary, is unnecessary. But there is a different form of serfdom now, and we are creating it, as our friend just now spoke of briefly. But we are, in fact, creating a broken down democracy, broken down capitalism. We're all involved in it, and we are producing a world that is sadly becoming crippled and broken. But there is plenty of hope. And I think that what is needed more than anything is that these crippled and broken people, which is part of us too, the poor, the marginalized, the excluded, need to be constantly given the platform. We have just made a film, and it's called Hope for Women. And anybody that watches it weeps, because these women from Albania, who were absolutely, totally imprisoned in their homes and deeply depressed, have arisen. I think that's the word that was used just now. Are standing tall. We have 16 women's businesses. They plant lavender, they have chickens and goats and crafts and so on, making oil, selling their products. A factory of wonderful tailoring, and I look at Maria over there from Mary Ward International Spain, and we have a wonderful collaboration with the women in Spain, with our women, and they make all the jackets now. They're going to be making all the jackets for the Loreto School in Spain. What a combination. There's Maria there. What a combination of bringing women from the dirt to this lily, which enables them to smile and stand up and shout their joy, their hope. And we have that capacity here to bring people out of serfdom, but we can also advocate at governmental level for a change in a system that is bringing about another form of serfdom. And really our voices have to shout loud. And I'd like to finish there with a word from Mother Teresa again. And the word is, I thirst. And everywhere you go into the chapels of Mother Teresa's communities, over the altar are the words, I thirst. And this is what is happening to millions of our traffic victims today. Millions of those vulnerable to trafficking who are in dire poverty. They're saying, I thirst, give me water, give me life so I can stand up and applaud my life and smile again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Imelda. It's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful feeling to be able to work with women who you have taken out of the dirt and given them an opportunity to shout with joy. And your collaborations with Mary God Spain is actually a lesson for all of us to take so that we can do more collaborations so that all of us can work so much better. I would now like to invite on stage a very, very special young girl, Mampi, who is now studying in class 12. She is a survivor of human trafficking and has been supported in her rehabilitation since 2013 by Justice and Care. She bravely testified against her trafficker at a court in Karnataka when she was really very, very young and received justice for herself. She aspires to continue her education and also support other girls who have been a victim of human trafficking. So can we have a round of applause for Mampi?
Good evening. আমার নাম মাম্পি আর আমি ক্লাস 12 এ পড়ি। যখন আমি এখান থেকে কলকাতা থেকে যখন আমাকে যারা ব্যাঙ্গালোর নিয়ে গেছিল তখন সেই সালটা ছিল 2012 আর তখন আমি এখান থেকে ব্যাঙ্গালোর যাই আর সেখানে যে আমি একটা বাজে একটা পরিস্থিতিতে আমি ছিলাম তো ওখান থেকে আমি অনেক কষ্টেই ছিলাম তো তার সেখান থেকে আমাকে পুলিশ আর স্টেশন কেয়ারের দিদিরা আমাকে ওখান থেকে উদ্ধার করে তো তারপরে আমি একটা হোমে থাকি ওখানে ছিলাম তারপর ওখান থেকে আমাকে কলকাতা পাঠানো হয় তো সেখানে এসে আমার মায়ের সাথে আমি আমার দেখা হয় তো ওই দিনটা থেকে আমি ভেবেছিলাম যে আমার সাথে যেটা হয়েছে তো সেটা তো হয়তো আমি যেটা হয়ে গেছে সেটা আর হয়তো ঠিক হবে না কিন্তু আমি যেই জায়গায় আছি সেখান থেকে আমি আরও এগোতে চেয়েছিলাম তো তার জন্য আমাকে স্টেশন কেয়ারের দিদিরা অনেক হেল্প করেছে আর এখন আমি সেখান পড়াশোনা করছি আমি 9-10 হোমে থেকে পড়াশোনা করি 2 বছর এখন আমি হস্টেলে থাকি তো হস্টেল থেকে পড়াশোনা করছি আর আমার ফিউচারে আমার দিদিদের মতনই হওয়ার ইচ্ছে কারণ আমি দিদিদের মতন হতে চাই এই কারণেই যে দিদিরা যেরকমভাবে মেয়েদের হেল্প করে বা অন্য আদার্স যেসব মেয়েরা অসহায় ফেসে গেছে আমার মতন ফেসে গেছিল তাদের দিদিরা হেল্প করে তো আমিও দিদিদের মতন এরকম কাজ করতে চাই বা দিদিদের মতন এরকম মেয়েদের হেল্প করতে চাই
I'll just translate what Mampi just shared with all of you. And I must say that this is the first time she has come to such a gathering and shared her experience, her aspirations. Thank you to all for acknowledging her aspirations. She mentioned that she was rescued in 2013 and whatever bad has happened in the past, she identified that she cannot overcome that. She cannot undo that phase of life, but probably she can work on and do better things in life. And that's when she met her mother again in Bangalore. She came back to Kolkata and decided to study. It's a very rare thing that girls persistently study after being rescued. It's been like 4 years and she is at it. She's going to complete her 12th standard this year. And as she said that she aspires to be a social worker and she wants to work for other girls who have been abused. And she doesn't want other girls to go through what she has gone through. Yeah. Thank you.
মাম্পি তুমি আগামী দিনে খুবই ভালো কাজ করবে and what Mampi actually said is she wants to be like her didis in justice and care. We would like to felicitate Mampi, who I think it takes a lot of courage at this age, she's not even 18 as yet, to come up on stage and speak about her experience. So she will be felicitated by Sister Edeline of the KMWSC. আগামী দিনে তুমি খুব ভালো ভালো কাজ করবে এটাই তোমার জন্য আমাদের প্রার্থনা Mr. Adrian Phillip is an advocate whose association with the human rights field has spanned for more than 15 years. Currently, as the Director Legal of Justice and Care, he leads and supervises a team of 22 legal advocates and interns and partners with governmental and non-governmental organizations on several projects. Mr. Phillip has been invited to present his suggestions on amendments to the rules relating to the laws relating to human trafficking and cybercrime. May I now invite Mr. Adrian Phillip to the podium.
Ordinarily, I take a leaf out of Sister Melda and say there's nothing left to be said. It's been all said. Following in the footsteps of these incredible speakers and inspirations to each one of us, there is very little that I can now contribute. I did think, though, that I'd like to share with you about my grandmother, who's been an inspiration to me in much of what I did, and I've learned much from her. My grandmother was one of those that enjoyed making cake, and it was my job as a little fella, 2 years old, to grind that sugar and egg and mix the ingredients. And I hated the job because, there weren't any mixers at that time. And I had to do it all by hand. And she'd make cake for like 400 people, I think. And that was my job, just keep doing that over and over and over again. And I kept asking, why do you make me do this? And why do you have to add, she was meticulous. So she'd measure each ingredient out in its right proportion. And then, first the eggs and the sugar need to be mixed together. Of course, today there are the supplements for eggs. But and then you've got to fold the flour in. You can't just throw it in. It has to be done precisely. Everything had to be done meticulously. And I just couldn't understand. But what happens if I don't have eggs? And what happens if I don't have sugar? So why don't you eat it up by yourself? So one day she decided to test me out and said, why don't you try one of these ingredients by yourself? And I said, are you kidding me? Eggs? You want me to just eat eggs like that? Raw eggs? Oh, all this flour. Yuck. Terrible. But she'd keep insisting that I try it. And, well, much later I figured out why she was forcing me to do this. For all of us here who've enjoyed making cake, every ingredient has a part to play in it. And each of those ingredients, to be most effective, needs to be in the right proportion. And even if one of them is off proportion, the cake will either sink, or just won't taste great, or there would be something wrong with it. None of those ingredients by themselves would make the cake, but everything together in its right proportion serves the purpose perfectly. I think these last 2 days, Sister Monica and her entire team, under able guidance from the superiors, have definitely put together a brilliant mix of academicians, lawyers, media personnel, professionals from so many different fields, and students. I heard so many papers presented in the last 2 days. Each, in their right measure, over these 2 days has served to make the perfect mix. The questions that we have for ourselves and that the eminent speakers here today have raised is, what happens after this conference? Where do we go from here? And in my conversation this afternoon with Sister Monica, I was like, so what do we do next? She's already on that path. I am today privileged to be in the presence of some fantastic people. People I've never met before, some I've met. And people who I've worked with, sitting in that audience there. Mr. Manobendra Mondo, Ms. Raja Ismail, Ms. Salma Ali, and a whole host of them. It's my privilege to be a part of each of these organizations and what they do. And if there was one thing that I had to invite everyone here to do, is to follow in those examples of putting together coalitions, of getting people to work together around an issue, of putting yourself in front of that mirror and saying, what can I do? Every one of us has our own hopes, aspirations, and agendas. And yet, there is just those issues, those few issues that we can come together to work on. Because if we were doing this by ourselves, if we chose to be just one ingredient, we'd never make the cake. But if we come together in the right mix, we would be able to put together an absolutely outstanding cake. And that's what each one of our speakers here today has called us to do. I will only like to reiterate that call. We want to bring change. All of us want to bring change. And that's why we are sitting here today. And if we didn't, then we wouldn't waste 2 whole days being here. In one of the panel discussions, one of my colleagues, Mr. Roop Sen, actually said when he meets politicians, when he meets lawmakers, no one of them talk about trafficking because they say no one talks to us about trafficking. No one ever tells us that, so-and-so is being trafficked, or my child is being trafficked, or someone I know is trafficking. What they do say is, my child is missing, or my children have gone to work elsewhere, or I don't know what's happened to them, they've disappeared. All of these are excuses, are camouflaged trafficking events. We, you and I, can start by talking to those politicians, by talking to those lawmakers, by writing emails, by sending letters. And if we are afraid to do this on our own feet, by ourselves, then join the coalitions. From ADSEC to ISCR's coalition, to what BNWLA does in Bangladesh. It's just outstanding to be part of one such movement and bring that change. And in only doing that, we shall overcome. Will you lead us again? words. Enough of words now. It's just action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Philip. And now I request the province leader of Loreto South Asia and the president of the two social centers of the Loreto congregation, Sister Anita Maria Braganza, to address the gathering.
Thank you, Gauri. What do I say at the end of such a rich sharing? But I need to say something, don't I? Well, the last 2 days have been for me spiritual experience, if I may use that word. Like I said at the opening of the conference, that I'm actually a teacher. And among some of the social workers in our group, they tell me, you're but a teacher. You're only a teacher. Because social workers think they do much more than teachers. Well, of course, we've had many discussions and arguments around the whole thing. But being here today, after these 2 days, and this is the first time that I've actually taken part in a conference of this nature, that I think we're actually equals. Because we've had scholars, and we've had one wonderful woman here this evening, Professor McKinnon, a very scholarly approach to the whole subject that left me thinking on how we use words so easily, or may describe a complex situation so easily, and yet there are layers and layers to go beneath. And we've had, over the last 2 days, heard social workers, people on the ground level, all kinds. And what has actually struck me is, including the wonderful collaboration with NUJS, I think that brought in another whole dimension to the discussions that have been going on and the sharings that have been going on over the last 2 days. So I'm delighted that I'm a teacher, and I'm delighted there are people who are working with social issues, and I'm glad that over the last 2 days we've come together. Having said that, I do believe, and I think we've heard this said a few times this evening, and I've been saying it in little circles around, that this can't be the end. It's only the start, I hope. And as Adrian put it so beautifully in such a simple metaphor of the cake, I really do believe that we've got to, here in West Bengal, where the statistics are so high for trafficking, we've just got to get together, get our acts together, to work together, to really combat this horrific happening. I know that each NGO perhaps has its own agenda and its own way of functioning and its hopes and aspirations. And as all human organizations are, many people would like to say, we are the best. We're doing better than you. I believe when we are working with human beings, when we are working with people who need our love, and we saw the passion with which Diane spoke, God, let's put our egos aside. Let's put our heads and our hearts and our whole beings to stand by those of us who need us to be there. And in that, we too will learn and grow. If God has allowed this to happen to our society, in our society, I do believe there's a learning for us in this. So it's not about us and them, it's about all of us being together in our human struggle. So as we come to the end of these 2 days, I feel very grateful, very humbled, very excited, because I have picked up such energy from the young people, even the group that just stood up wanting to sing, from older people, from middle-aged people who are all so actively engaged in the field, coming from so many different parts of the country and the world, wanting to learn, wanting to share, wanting to do something. So my hope and my prayer is that this today conference is really going to be the start of us engaging with the many difficult questions and all of us working together to do something good. So we leave here this evening, I believe, having networked, I believe having made more friends, and I hope that we have a greater openness to all those who we've not networked with this evening, and that we will leave our doors and our hearts open to all those who come with a desire to improve the life of another. I know we women have a lot of passion, and we're talking a lot about women and children. Our foundress, way back in the 17th century, said something which we quote quite often, and it can become quite a cliche actually among us, that women in time to come will do great things. And Mary Ward was someone who actually single-handedly almost, along with her group of women who believed in what she saw as God inviting us women religious to, stood up against so many structures, so many institutions, including the church, to stand up for what she believed was, I wouldn't even say the rights of women, so much as for the dignity of women. So what Mary Ward said way back in the 17th century, I think, still holds today. And women in time to come will do great things, and ... women today are doing great things, and ... women in time to come will continue doing great things along with men. Thank you so much, KMWSC, and to all your partners for working together to make these 2 days possible. So may God continue to guide us and bless us, and be with all those who are struggling, trying to find a way out of whatever might be their story. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Anita. For the next segment, may I request our dignitaries on the dais to kindly take their seats in the auditorium. Professor Mahesh Menon will do a summary of the 2-day conference. Professor Mahesh Menon is Assistant Professor of Law at the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences and the National Law School of India University. He will do a summary of the 2-day international conference that has just concluded. We will just take a minute's time to clear the stage, and I would like to invite Professor Menon to the stage.
I know that we are running late, and I will not stand between you and the cup of tea. So rather than making a long, elaborate summary of everything that we discussed, I'll just highlight what the key points are. Yeah. The idea of the conference, in fact, was to create a platform, a common platform for different set of people from different groups, NGOs, academics, practitioners, and government to come together to interact. Probably because typically conferences in India happens to be in silos, where all of these people rarely come together into one platform. And the idea was to bring people from different backgrounds all around the table so that we can interact and exchange ideas. And I think we have done a good job with that, because when we look at the profile of the people who attended the conference, we have 389 participants from 14 countries and 15 states. About 101 NGO representative attended, 27 educational institutions, and also some government participation. So I think as a starting point, we've done fairly well for ourselves. all the papers and the discussions that happened in the last 2 days, of course, we have all put them together, and we hope to publish it in the form of a book in the next coming set of months. We'll edit them and put them together and send it to all of you. But I'm not going to take time to discuss each and every point right now, because that's going to be a lot of time. But let's look at the way forward. What do we need to do in terms of the key action points that all of us together can work on? Well, there were a large number of ideas that came together. I think the primary thing is the need for us to work across borders. So across all the themes, one point that kept popping up is how people tend to work in silos, whether it's the NGOs, again, they try to work within their borders. Even if it's the government look at what's happening at this end of the border or that end of the border. But as someone pointed out, not a single case where, say, the government of India and the government of Bangladesh work together to bring a core prosecution to success or conduct an investigation into one incident into its entirety. They always try to look at things from their end or their own borders. So there is a need for us to work together, and cooperation across borders at all levels. That's one thing that we need to work towards. That's some common point that came up in each and every session. And of course, the second thing is create platforms for periodic exchange of knowledge. A lot of people are doing interesting things, especially the session on best practices was very interesting. A lot of new ideas, innovative approaches to doing things, but typically not many people get to know about it. Probably it's put into print and circulated in a small gathering or in a very small set of people. There's a need to create a platform where all of this can be put together, which is searchable, freely accessible, so that anyone who wants knowledge can easily access it. So that's another thing that we will work on. Third thing, well, one thing that was missing here as a stakeholder was we did not invite even a single private corporation or a multinational corporation representative at this conference. So that's something that we actually missed, because a lot of people pointed out that often the beneficiaries of trafficking, not directly, indirectly, are these multinational corporations who use their products in their supply chains, all of that. So that's actually one point that we missed. But in the next edition of the conference, we'll ensure that representation from private corporations will also be here on the table. And we'll also acknowledge that there is a need to start engaging with them on a broader platform. And last, of course, the need to recognize that the world is changing now. Probably these channels of trafficking or the way modus operandi is now slowly shifting online. That's a new world, new set of challenges, and probably India as a country is not entirely ready, or we are not even in a position where we have understood what exactly is going on. So as a starting point, to take this up as a matter of concern, to initiate some kind of research on this so that we can understand what is the problem that we need to address. So that's 4 key action points for us. We will of course take it forward. There's a whole set of organizations with like-minded individuals who came together to have this conference. About I think 5 organizations and 10 people. We promise you that we will take it up and we will work on these agendas little by little, so that we'll treat this as a starting point. And probably if all goes well, we'll have another edition of this conference sometime, maybe after 2 years or 3 years. And I hope to see you all there once again. Please do stay in touch. Please do be a part of the platform of ideas that we are building, so that we can exchange and we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mahesh. We have now organized a very short dance recital for you. A self-transforming civilization that defies all attempts to freeze it in time and space. Living India is a mosaic of varied cultures, layer upon layer, tempered in a history of common vitality. India offers to the world a visage that is truly spectacular, heterogeneous and diverse. Dance and festivity are an integral part of the Indian ethos. It is a celebration of life itself, an attempt to syncretize with the forces of nature. Man joins creation in invoking the spirit of Anandam, or joy, which is the essence of our spiritual quest. We now take you on a short journey through Bengal and show you a very small slice of our beautiful culture.
Anandadheva खल्विमानि भूतानि जायन्ते आनन्देन जातानि जीवन्ति आनन्दं प्रयन्ति अभिसंविशन्ति।
তিনি আনন্দরূপ অমৃত, তাঁর আনন্দ থেকেই সকল প্রাণীর আবির্ভাব, তাঁর আনন্দেই সকলে প্রাণবান, জীবনান্তে তাঁর আনন্দেই প্রত্যাবর্তন। আমরা যে সেই আনন্দময় সত্তা থেকে উদ্ভূত, এই অনুভব আমাদের রোমাঞ্চিত করুক। আমরা যে জগতের আনন্দ যজ্ঞে আমন্ত্রিত, এই বোধ আমাদের উদ্দীপিত করুক। আমরা শুধু আমন্ত্রিত নই, এই মহোৎসবে আমরা অংশগ্রহণকারী।
জগতে আনন্দ যোগে আমার নিমন্ত্রণ, ধন্য হলো মানব জীবন। জগতে আনন্দ যোগে আমার নিমন্ত্রণ, নয়ন আমার রূপের পুরে সাধ মিটায় বেড়ায় ঘুরে। নয়ন আমার রূপের পুরে সাধ মিটায় বেড়ায় ঘুরে। শ্রবণ আমার গভীর সুরে হয়েছে মগন। জগতে আনন্দ যোগে আমার নিমন্ত্রণ। তোমার যোগে দিয়েছো ভাট বাজাই আমি বাঁশি, গানে গানে গেথে বেড়াই প্রাণের কান্না হাসি। তোমার যোগে দিয়েছো ভাট বাজাই আমি বাঁশি, গানে গানে গেথে বেড়াই প্রাণের কান্না হাসি। এখন সময় হয়েছে কি সভায় গিয়ে তোমায় দেখি। এখন সময় হয়েছে কি সভায় গিয়ে তোমায় দেখি। জয়ধ্বনি শুনিয়ে যাব এ মোর নিবেদন। জগতে আনন্দ যোগে আমার নিমন্ত্রণ। ধন্য হলো ধন্য হলো মানব জীবন। জগতে আনন্দ যোগে আমার নিমন্ত্রণ।
পথে এলো মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি এই রাঙা মাটির পথে এলো মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি বাঁশি বাজে বুকের মাঝে এলো মন লাগে না কাজে এলো রইতে নারী ঘরে হলো প্রাণ হলো উদাসীল মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি এই রাঙা মাটির পথে এলো মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি ফুলেলো মহুয়া বনে লুটিয়ে পড়ে মাতাল চাঁদের হাসিল মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি এই রাঙা মাটির পথে এলো মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি চোখে ভালো লাগে যাকে তারে দেখবো পথের বাঁকে চোখে ভালো লাগে যাকে তারে দেখবো পথের বাঁকে তার চাঁচর কেশে পরিয়ে দেব ঝুমকো জামার তার গলার মালার কুসুম কেড়ে করবো কানের দুল তারে নাচের তালের ইশারাতে বলবো ভালোবাসিল মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি এই রাঙা মাটির পথে এলো মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি বাঁশি বাজে বুকের মাঝে এলো মন লাগে না কাজে এলো রইতে নারী ঘরে হলো প্রাণ হলো উদাসীল মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি এই রাঙা মাটির পথে এলো মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি মাদল বাজে বাজে বাঁশের বাঁশি
ঢাকের তালে কোমর দোলে খুশিতে নাচে মন আজ বাজা কাসর জমা আসর থাকবে মা আর কতক্ষণ ঢাকের তালে কোমর দোলে খুশিতে নাচে মন আজ বাজা কাসর জমা আসর থাকবে মা আর কতক্ষণ মায়ের রূপে মন ভরে যায় প্রণাম জানাই রাঙা পায় করে ধুনচি দুহাতে নাচে রে এখন ঢাকের তালে কোমর দোলে খুশিতে নাচে মন আজ বাজা কাসর জমা আসর থাকবে মা আর কতক্ষণ
বলো দুর্গা মাইকি বলো দুর্গা মাইকি বলো দুর্গা মাইকি বলো দুর্গা মাইকি
আসবে আবার মা বছর পরে দু চোখ তবু হয় জলে ভরে আসবে মা লক্ষ্মী কদিন পরে মন যে তবু হয় কেমন করে
আমি জানাবো মাকে জানাবো আজ আমারে মনের আশা যেন এ মনে এই জীবনে থাকে এমনই ভালোবাসা মায়ের ভাষান হবে রে আজ চলছে বরণ আরতি নাচ ঢাই কোড়া কোড়ো ঢ্যাম কোড়া কোড়ো তোলে রে মাতন ঢাকের তালে কোমর দোলে খুশিতে নাচে মন আজ বাজা কাসর জমা আসর থাকবে মা আর কতক্ষণ
আমি জানি না কেন জানি না আজ নিজেকে নতুন লাগে মন সেজেছে রং লেগেছে এত খুশি দেখিনি আগে
আমি পেয়েছি ফিরে পেয়েছি কত দিনের পরে এই হাসি তাই মনে হয় শুধু মনে হয় যেন এভাবে সুখে ভাসি
বরণ শেষে সিঁদুর খেলা থাকবে মনে বিদায় বেলা আজ সিঁদুরে সোহাগে রাঙা জীবন ঢাকের তালে কোমর দোলে খুশিতে নাচে মন আজ বাজা কাসর জমা আসর থাকবে মা আর কতক্ষণ
বলো দুর্গা মাইকি বলো দুর্গা মাইকি বলো দুর্গা মাইকি বলো দুর্গা মাইকি
Om Shanti Om. शान्तिः वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्विश्वे देवा शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिः सर्वशान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः सा मा शान्तिरेधि
Only music and dance have the power to cut across cultural divides and transcend the limitations of national and parochial boundaries. We would like to thank Mr. Dhiman Shankar, who has led this team of very beautiful dancers, and they will be felicitated by Professor Mahesh Menon. Thank you, Dhiman Babu, and thank you to the beautiful dancers of your repertory. And may I now invite Sister Monica Suchiang of the Kolkata Mary Ward Social Center to propose the vote of thanks.
I promise I will not take much time, just few minutes. Brenda, where are you? I'm going to use few words. Okay, on behalf of Sister Anita here, the province leader, and the president of the 2 social centers, along with our partners and the Loreto sisters in India and across the world, I'm here to propose a short vote of thanks. This event gives us the forum to connect, interact, and dialogue with you, everyone present here, and now we can move forward to achieving our goals. I would like to offer my best wishes for all the endeavors of every individual present with us. I hope the discussions, sharing, and learning of best practices over the last 2 days has been of benefit and has assisted all of us in building up a network of contacts and working relationship with each other. I hope we all can identify the opportunities for further collaborations and finally put a stop to human trafficking worldwide. Before we end, I would like to thank all of you for joining us in this today's conference. Your presence here shows a strong commitment to work towards combating the widespread issue of human trafficking throughout the world. We would all agree that now we have found a platform to benefit from each other's experiences and insight. But I cannot let this conference close without thanking certain key people who have helped make this conference a grand success. I would like to thank ICCR Kolkata and Mr. Day for providing us this wonderful venue. Thank you. Much thanks are also due to the general consultants from Rome, Judy, Macarena, and Brenda for your presence with us here. And I sincerely thank Sister Anita Maria Briganza, the provincial leader, Loreto South Asia, and the president of the 2 social centers and her team members, Sisters Marian, Sabrina, and Alma, for placing your confidence and trust in all of us at KMWSC and along with the partners. I wish to express my gratitude to all the knowledgeable moderators, eminent speakers, and noted paper presenters, the respected keynote speakers for the 2 days, who have been so patient, cooperative with us. we understand what it takes to be such powerhouse of knowledge, and we value your interventions. Thank you, Professor Catherine and Ms. Flavia Agnes, for your accepting our invitations. It requires immense courage to face the world. I salute all the champions who have come forward and share their victory story, thus inspiring others for the last 2 days. You do not know, you have silently motivated hundreds around. I like to thank all of them. We appreciate the role of the State Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, West Bengal. Ma'am, thank you so much for your constant support for the last 7 months. Assam and Orissa, without your active involvement, a substantial part of the exchange would have been incomplete. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the participants from 15 countries, 14 states across India, different universities, schools, and NGOs. You have been the lifeline of this conference and push up the numbers from an anticipated to 270 to 389. To the media, I request you to extend your vital support to raise awareness and sensitivity on the issue, but not to promote individuals or organizations, but to highlight the issues. I express my sincere thanks to all academic partners, hospitality partners, sponsors, the logistics and technical team, friends of Mary Ward. Without your unconditional support, we would not have been able to achieve this. And then I would like to thank for the spectacular performance of Mr. Shankar and his team. Thank you very much. A significant part of planning of this conference was carried out the time span of 7 to 8 months by our committed and selfless core committee members and the KMWSC team. We brainstorm, discuss over more than 22 meetings and interacted with so many accomplished yet humble individuals. This has been a huge learning for all of us in Loreto. I now would like to invite the province leader along with her team members to come on stage to honor the effort and the hard work of the core committee members. Sister Anita, Sister Marian, and Sister Sabrina, please come on. So on this note, I request the core committee members, Ms. Ananya Chakrabarti, Chairperson, West Bengal Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Ma'am, please come up. Dr. Bhatt, Vice Chancellor of National University of Juridical Sciences, and his team, Mr. Menon and Mr. Khan, and Mr. Joydev Mazumdar, Director of VSSW, and Mr. Mondal, Chairperson ATSEC South Asia. Wherever you are, sir, please come up. And the Justice and Care team, can we all have you here? Okay. And Mr. Lucas and Ms. Basu, please come on stage. So now I would like Sister Anita and Sister Marian to honor our core committee members who have worked very hard for the last 7 months. So I request Sister Anita to honor Ms. Ananya. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your constant support. I ask Sister Marian to honor the Vice Chancellor of NUJS. Sister Anita for Mr. Khan. And Sister Marian for Mr. Mazumdar. And Sister Anita for Mr. Menon, and Marion for Mr. Mondal, and Sister Anita for one of our team from Justice and Care. Just wonderful left. And Marion for Mr. Lucas, and Anita for Miss Basu. Thank you so much once again for your effort. I wouldn't have managed to have this 2 days conference without your support along with my team. Thank you very much, and God bless each one.
We will now have the pledge to work together in this fight against human trafficking. And to lead us in the pledge, may I request Ms. Anurna Chakraborty and Sister Anita Braganza.
For the unborn child, I will love you. For the newborn leaf, I will cherish you. For the uncared, I will ask you. For the untouched, I will help you. For the old and the ailing, I will come to your aid. For the not loved, I will brace you. For the missing, I will seek you. To all our brothers and sisters, let us unite and be resilient in our efforts. Let us raise our hands to support the cause, to stop the menace. Let us promise to intervene and not be blind. Let us wake up to the need of the hour and be vigilant. We pledge to combat and disseminate the spark and spread the light that has enlightened us. We've come to the end of saying this pledge. I also say thank you really to the KMWSC staff who've not been mentioned. So thank you so much, Monica's team. And it is sad, but it's also my pleasure to have the last word and to declare this conference closed, but not goodbye, till we meet again for the next one. God bless, and have a lovely evening. Hats off, Nilanjana, to each one on the team. Thank you so much. I was feeling afraid to mention names in case I did miss anyone, but thank you, all of you on the team. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite you for a cup of tea in the atrium. Please don't go away without your cup of tea. And please collect all certificates from the help desks outside, from the track registry desks. Please collect your participation certificate. And thank you so much for being a part of this event. Thank you and have a nice evening.